If you're not going to help with the housework, then get out. My husband and I were living with our eldest son and his wife, and we were contributing $3,000 to the household every month. However, this is the kind of abuse we received from our daughter-in-law. She has also harassed us in other ways. This made me and my husband mad. We want nothing to do with a woman like her anymore. We decided to get our revenge. My name is Catherine. I am 62 years old, working part-time, and live with my husband John, who is of the same age. John is a kind and hard-working office worker, so we have a stable income and we have never had a major quarrel. We have a son named Tom, who is 32 years old. Tom, who resembles his father, has grown up to be a very kind person. After graduating from university, he joined a private company and works diligently. 2 years ago, he married a woman named Emily, whom he met at the same company. But it turns out Emily was terrible. Emily seemed sincere and sweet when we first met her. Tom told us she is very diligent at work and has a good reputation with her superiors. Emily is 6 years younger than Tom, and although we were initially concerned about their age difference, we felt that Tom would be okay marrying her. After their wedding, Tom and Emily started living together in an apartment. After getting married, Emily said, "I'll take over all the household chores on behalf of Tom," and became a full-time housewife. It seemed like Tom was really grateful for that. Because Emily takes care of the household chores so well, I can focus on my work. I'm truly grateful. Both my husband and I had no doubt that our son had married a good woman, but over time, Emily began to show her true colors. First, there was an occasion where all the relatives gathered for New Year's, and we saw Emily there. However, at first, I didn't recognize her. This was because she had drastically changed her appearance. When we had met her previously, Emily had black hair and didn't wear heavy makeup. She looked very much like a quiet and demure woman, but now she has transformed into a flashy blonde like a teenager. She also wore a big necklace around her neck, making it hard to believe she was the same person. Not only my husband, but also the other relatives were taken aback by her drastic transformation. That's when Tom stepped in to smooth things over. "I'm sorry for surprising you all. One day, I came home from work, and suddenly Emily had changed her look like this. It was a huge shock for me too. But she does all the housework properly, and we have no problems. Besides, Emily is a full-time housewife. Please let this go." Hearing this, I felt relieved. If Tom says it's okay, then it's fine. I was just surprised by her changed appearance. I'm sorry for that. We shouldn't judge people by their looks, and it's not my place to complain. The others also seemed to agree. After that, we all enjoyed drinking together. However, an incident occurred with Emily. She got heavily drunk and began hurling insults at the people around her. "Hey, you dare to defy me? You know, in middle school, I once took down 3 classmates at once." It seemed that she had a bad habit when drunk. Even towards me and my husband, she ranted, "Why aren't you guys dead yet? You all nuisances. Nobody's happy with you alive." Those words deeply hurt me. Even when drunk, there are things one should and shouldn't say. My husband looked angry too. He was clearly surprised and said, "Hey, you've gone too far. Apologize." However, even to Tom, Emily retaliated. "You are the one who dumps all the housework on me. Don't act so high and mighty. A scrawny man like you? I could knock you down in an instant." After that, Emily only got more unruly. She verbally attacked everyone inside, causing trouble. Eventually, she passed out from the alcohol and finally quieted down, but the mood was completely ruined. Everyone was angry at Emily. One of the relatives then remarked, "Emily mentioned earlier about knocking down her classmates. Was she a troubled kid?" "No, Emily graduated from a national university. I thought she was genuinely a serious person at heart, but..." Despite what Tom said, that relative looked skeptical. Just because she claims to have led an honest life doesn't mean there's solid proof, right? Maybe we should investigate her past and find out what kind of person she truly is. I agreed with this. Given the situation, Tom also seemed to take it seriously and promised to look into it. Emily had already lost her parents and didn't have much contact with the relatives, so a private detective was hired for investigation. The results showed that Emily had been quite a troublemaker in junior high and had been the leader of a delinquent group. Even the most notorious delinquents in the area were subservient to Emily. From the senior year of junior high, perhaps due to her future prospects, she appeared to become serious and graduated from a national university. However, it seems she still had a thing with the delinquent group. We even found out that while Tom was at work, she invited her delinquent friends over. Moreover, they were so loud that it started an argument with the neighbors. It turned out that Emily was just hiding her true nature and was quite a character. Tom was so shocked that he suggested they get a divorce. "I'm sorry, I promise I will behave from now on. I need you, Tom. Please, I beg you, don't divorce me." Crying, she went back to her old attire, pulled out her smartphone, and deleted her friends' contacts in front of Tom. She also called and apologized to the relatives who had been harassed at the New Year gathering. I received a call as well, and she apologized multiple times. Tom reconsidered when he saw the extent of her efforts. As a result, they didn't divorce and continued their married life. After all, Tom is the one married to Emily. My husband and I decided to respect Tom's decision and not interfere too much. I met Emily during summer and her attitude has changed drastically. I thought it might be alright after all, but then one day, while I was working part-time, I lifted a heavy box. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my back and couldn't move at all. Other staff hurriedly took me to the hospital, and I was told it was a severe case of a thrown out back and was advised to rest for a while. When I informed Tom about this over the phone, he responded with this suggestion: "Why not take this opportunity to live with Emily and me? Of course, it will be all four of us, including Dad. Both you and Dad are getting on in years, and I think incidents of injuries and illness might increase. It would be better if Emily and I were around in case something happens." He has a point. Once my back healed, my husband and I, along with our eldest son and his wife, discussed and formally decided to live together. My husband and I live in a big house, so there was no problem for the four of us to live together. Therefore, our eldest son and his wife moved in with us, and our shared life began. Initially, everything went very smoothly. Emily did half of the household chores, significantly reducing my burden. My husband and I contributed from our salaries, putting $3,000 into the household every month. I couldn't contribute much since I work part-time, but I wanted to alleviate the financial burden on our eldest son and his wife, even if it was just a little. However, Emily gradually started to change her attitude. First, she would often say she wasn't feeling well and push household chores onto me. At first, I took her word for it and did most of the chores for her, but Emily seemed perfectly fine. She would even have seconds at meal times, and her complexion looked healthy. Moreover, she started going out for the whole day, claiming she was going out to play. Emily, I don't want to say this, but are you truly feeling unwell? You seem pretty lively, and you're out a lot. Taking a deep breath, I asked her that, only to be met with a fierce glare from Emily. What? Are you saying I'm a liar? Try mocking me and see what happens. I'll knock you out. I was taken aback. Such crude language she used. At the same time, I realized she wasn't sorry at all. She might not want to separate from Tom, but it was clear she was only pretending that she changed. Emily, perhaps thinking I was scared of her, snorted in amusement. Scared, are you? I guess so. I've been playing the demure woman up until now, but I've reached my limit with that. From now on, I'll fully embrace my true self. You know what happens if you go against me, right? Emily probably threatened people like this during her school years. Maybe she's continued doing so into adulthood because it worked on her peers. It would be a lie if I said I wasn't scared of Emily, but I've lived for 62 years, and I'm not the type of buckle under the threats of a former delinquent. I responded firmly. If your harassment goes too far, it might become a crime. You know, I'm not your robot and I won't just do as you say. If you do anything, I won't hesitate to report it to the police. I coldly warned her. Emily was clearly taken back by my unexpected response, though she quickly retaliated. Shut up, I won't forgive you. Emily's loud shout brought Tom and my husband running, clearly startled. It was Saturday that day, so everyone was at home. I quickly explained the situation to them, and both looked displeased. We all agreed that we should discuss it immediately. My husband said to Emily, "First, apologize to Catherine." But Emily had no intention of apologizing. Instead, she crossed her arms in the defiant manner. Why should I apologize to that old hag? I thought I'd had Catherine handle the housework, so that's why I agreed to live here. Despite that, my burden hasn't reduced as much as I hoped. What's wrong with being angry at someone old and useless who's just a burden? Tom, my husband, and I were all in shock. How selfish could she be to have that as her reason for living with us? Emily continued with more audacious words. No matter what anyone says, I won't change. From now on, you all will be my hands and feet. Oh, but I don't need Catherine or John. If you're too old to do the chores, then you're useless. Get out. Hearing this, my patience finally ran out. I resolved to have nothing more to do with such a woman. I planned my revenge in my head. It seemed my husband felt the same intense anger. It was rare to see him, usually so calm, with such an angry look on his face. And then he made a suggestion. Maybe we should move out then. I also felt the urge to get away from Emily immediately, so I nodded and said, yes, let's do that. My husband and I quickly packed some essentials and left immediately. Since we couldn't move large items like dressers on the spot, we decided to come back for them later. Tom said he still had things to discuss with Emily, so he chose to stay behind. After leaving the house, my husband and I headed to a cheap motel. We didn't own another property, and we didn't want to impose on friends, so we decided to stay there until we found a new place. The next day, Emily called me at 8 in the morning. I thought it would be best to ignore it, but she was so persistent, calling over 20 times in an hour. Even though I regretted not blocking her number earlier, I grew curious about what she wanted and decided to pick up once. "Hello, is this Catherine? I have a favor to ask you." From the other end of the line, I heard Emily's voice, feigning innocence. I immediately sensed something was up, and to be blunt, it was off-putting. From being serious to acting like a delinquent, and now this cutesy act, I wondered just how many personalities this woman had. One thing was clear: regardless of her demeanor, Emily was not to be trusted. Deciding it was a waste of time, I said, "I don't want to," and hung up immediately, blocking her number. I also blocked all her messaging apps, ensuring she couldn't reach me. Seeing this, my husband did the same. We both decided to permanently ignore any contact from Emily. In the afternoon, I received a call from Tom. "Mom, I've divorced Emily. I left the house early this morning and just filled the divorce papers. Last night, when I told Emily I wanted a divorce, she challenged me to go ahead and do it, so I didn't hesitate and left her." Hearing this, I believed my son made a wise decision. He could never be happy with a woman like her. In return, I informed him about Emily's call and her strange attempt at acting cutesy. When she was in her delinquent phase, whenever she had a fight with her boyfriend, she'd act all cutesy to make up with him. It's ridiculous that she thinks such a childish tactic would still work as an adult. She's really foolish. I completely agreed. While Emily might have a proper educational background, she's immature and arrogant. Cutting ties with her was the right choice. Actually, there's more. Emily was cheating on me. What? Really? This genuinely surprised me. As aggressive as she was, cheating too? I always suspected her of faking her health issues. She looked perfectly healthy and was often going out, so I hired a detective. And sure enough, she was cheating on me with some guy. I even have the photos as evidence. When Tom sent me the pictures, there was Emily kissing a young blonde man on the street. He looked quite flashy. I've told Emily that I'll be demanding compensation for her infidelity, and I'm serious about it. I'll also be seeking damages from the man she cheated with. Even when I told her this, she seemed so smug and unaffected. Then why do you think she called me? Who knows? Probably since I left, she wanted to know where I went. She never believed I would actually leave. She thought she could bully me into staying by her side. But now that I'm really gone, she's probably getting desperate. I sighed. Whatever the reason, I wouldn't aid such a person. I hoped she'd experience loneliness to its fullest. Eventually, my husband, Tom, and I decided on a new residence. We chose an apartment for the three of us. We considered moving back to our old house after evicting Emily, but it would be too large for Tom to live alone once we passed away. And there's a chance it would become vacant. With vacant houses being problematic, we thought it best to sell it. I don't necessarily want to live in a house. It's okay to sell it. Emily would lose her home, but that's not our concern. We still had most of our belongings at the old house, so with the help of a relative, we planned to retrieve them. Upon entering, we found Emily with an unnerving grin. I realized I can't handle being alone. Can't we all live together again? Also, I want to save money and I don't want to pay Tom any compensation. Seeing Emily unapologetic and brazenly asking for favors, I exploded with anger. When you ask for a favor, be sincere about it. Drop that flippant attitude. Regardless of how you ask, I won't grant your request. Following my outburst, my husband coldly stated, "We are selling this house, so leave as soon as possible, and make sure to properly compensate Tom. I can never love you again. Stop trying to reconcile." Tom was furious too. Suddenly, Emily dropped her act. "I thought marrying Tom with his stable income would allow me to be a housewife and have an easy life. But now I genuinely love Tom. Of course, I believe I need Catherine and John too." No matter what she said, the anger from my husband, Tom, and me wouldn't subside. In fact, it only intensified. Seeing this, our silent relative, unable to bear the scene any longer, interjected, "Emily, you're the worst. If you have so much to say, how about we go one-on-one? You seem to brag about your strengths, but just so you know, I've competed in national judo championships." The relative quickly approached Emily, giving her an intimidating glare. An intense aura emanated from his entire being. This relative, a man in his 30s, is known for his incredible strength. It's true he competed in the national judo championship. He was invited just in case Emily caused any trouble. Even Emily, sensing the danger, became fearful and stammered, "No, I don't want to fight." Once the move is complete, never bother Catherine and her family again. You should also leave quickly, but first, apologize properly. Hearing the relative's stern voice, Emily suddenly became very cooperative. "Yes, I understand. I'll leave right away. I'll give you all my large belongings. I'm truly sorry." She even prostrated herself, quickly gathered her things, and left with great haste. Seeing this, the relative smirked. Emily probably can only act tough around those she perceives as weaker than her. She grovels to those she sees as stronger. She is spineless. My husband, Tom, and I chuckled recalling Emily's hasty departure. With the nuisance gone, our moving preparations proceeded smoothly, and we soon settled into our new home. Later on, Emily rented an apartment and started living alone. As promised, Tom filed for damages. Perhaps because they went through lawyers, both Emily and her affair partner quickly complied and paid up. They probably agreed promptly because they were dealing with someone who appeared to have the powerful backing of an attorney. As the relative had said, "It seems like Emily can't stand up to those stronger than her." Since then, I haven't interacted with Emily, but I know what she's up to. She was reported as arrested on the news. Combining the news contents, information from acquaintances, and my proposal experiences, it seems Emily's life went something like this. After paying the compensation, Emily was left with almost no savings. She tried to remarry her affair partner to be taken care of, but he disappeared without a trace. Desperate, she got a job at the private company but quickly quit after verbally abusing her boss. Then, shamelessly, she approached my workplace, my husband's and Tom's, demanding money. But the three of us completely ignored her and didn't engage at all, so she seemed to give up eventually. Buried in debt and desperately needing money, she reached out to delinquent friends, but no one seemed willing to help the now downtrodden Emily. Enraged, Emily assaulted one of them severely and ended up getting arrested, leading her to prison. My husband, Tom, and I all shared that sentiment. She got what she deserved. She kept up her misdeeds since her school days, always putting on a facade without ever reflecting on her actions. For someone like her, prison seemed like the appropriate place. I hope she takes this time to reflect on her past actions. On the other hand, My days with my husband and Tom have been peaceful. The three of us live harmoniously, and we are even planning a trip for the next long holiday. Additionally, our apartment, though smaller compared to a house, is easier to clean and is conveniently located near the station. Moving was definitely the right decision. We wish to continue enjoying our serene life together.
My name is Emma. I currently work hard in a company that I co-founded with my friend, and I live with my husband John. John and I live in an apartment, but when my mother-in-law found out, she had some words to say to us. I think it's okay to live in an apartment if you're living alone. But if you're married, I'd like you to live in a proper place, like a condominium or a house. She seemed to imply that living in an apartment isn't a proper lifestyle. My mother-in-law has lived in a house built by her parents since she was born, and the house she currently lives in is the one she's lived in since she was a child. Maybe she thinks it doesn't take much effort to live in a house. Currently, the only things my in-laws have to pay for are property taxes and renovation fees. The rest is just utilities and various other living expenses. But we don't have much money to spend on those living expenses. Our financial situation is tighter than we thought, and we can't afford to move to a place that costs more than our current apartment. Even if you say just move, there are many expenses like moving company fees, cleaning fees, and down payments for the new place. Because we can't spend money on extra things, John and I have lived in an apartment the entire year since we got married. But my mother-in-law, concerned about this, made comments like the above during New Year's when other relatives were around. Among the relatives, there were those who also lived in apartments, and they clearly looked displeased. One of the female relatives responded with a disapproving tone, "Excuse me." To that woman, she said, "No, I'm not saying apartments are bad. But it's embarrassing for me as a mother to see a decent child like John continue living in an apartment." My mother-in-law, who kept glancing at me, seemed to want to say that it's my fault Johnny's living in an apartment. My mother-in-law made those remarks in the kitchen, where the men were already having a drink, and only a few female relatives, myself, and my mother-in-law were present. It seemed like John didn't think that there was any animosity between my mother-in-law and me. We've been married for a year, and I've been so busy that I hardly had any chance to chat with my mother-in-law. I hadn't been sure whether we were on good terms or bad terms. However, from what she said, I instantly realized that she had no intention of getting along with me. The decision to live in an apartment was John's. "So, if you have any complaints, can you please address them to him?" I firmly stated, and then took the pot of rice I had just finished serving to the dining area. For a moment, she looked surprised, but then she frowned. Later on, when I returned to the kitchen, my mother-in-law glared at me. But perhaps she was cautioned by another female relative, as she didn't make further remarks to me. On the other hand, the other female relatives defended me by saying things like, "Living in an apartment is perfectly normal, everything is expensive nowadays, and buying a standalone house is not easy." Under different circumstances, John and I might have considered buying a house, but in our current situation, it's far from possible. When no other female relatives were around, my mother-in-law would start making sarcastic comments to me. "John is earning well, so the reason you can't afford a house is probably because someone is wasting money," she would say loud enough for me to hear. I decided to ignore her, thinking of it as her just mumbling to herself. No matter how you look at it, there's nothing wrong with living in an apartment, and I'm not the reason for our current situation. I shouldn't be blamed for our choice to live in an apartment by my mother-in-law. So, after the New Year gathering, I told Yoshi about what his mother had said. Your mother told me she doesn't want us to live in an apartment forever. She said living in an apartment isn't considered a proper lifestyle. I said, to which John's eyes widened in surprise. What? What kind of life does she expect us to lead then? It seems like she wants us to move to a condominium or live in a standalone house. John shrugged and said, with our earnings, affording a condo or a house is like a distant dream. I wish my mom would stop daydreaming. She still thinks I'm some kind of genius. It seems that when John was younger, he was very smart and was always pampered and praised as a genius by his mother. When I was in elementary school, it seems that my mother-in-law used to brag about John to the neighbors, prompting them to compliment how smart and impressive he was. Perhaps my mother-in-law still clings to that feeling to this day. She had grown accustomed to having her son praised by others and continues to believe that she deserves such admiration. However, when one reaches middle school and high school, effort begins to play a pivotal role. John, having been spoiled, lacked the effort in his studies compared to his classmates, resulting in a decline in his test scores. As a consequence, even after graduating high school, he couldn't get into the university he aspired to and settled for his backup choice. Nevertheless, my mother-in-law still seems to believe that her son is a genius and that he continues to lead a superior life than others. What struck me, however, was that John never corrected her misconception. It's one thing if he were still a child in middle or high school and felt unable to refute a parent's praise. But now, John is an adult. Isn't he uncomfortable with being continuously labeled a genius when he earns below the average salary for his age? Hey, John, why don't you explain to your mother why we don't have money for a house? Huh? Why should I? Because your mother said it to me. She thinks we don't have money for a house because someone is spending recklessly. She assumes you're earning money and I'm spending all of it. Really? Maybe you're just overthinking and overinterpreting what my mom said? John sighed. That single gesture made it clear that he was reluctant to confront his mother about the truth. Even so, considering that his mother was making snide remarks about his wife, one would think he could at least caution her. But John didn't budge. There were other underlying issues, but from then on, I started harboring some resentment towards John. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law began to frequently visit our apartment. We had rarely seen each other before due to our busy schedules. However, after a tiring day at work, I would return to our apartment only to find my mother-in-law and John there, with John eagerly eating the dinner she had prepared. And then, the mother-in-law said to me as I came home tired, "Oh, you're just coming home now? Dinner time has already passed. Keeping your husband waiting while you're out having fun, you're failing as a wife." "You'll be skipping dinner tonight," she said arrogantly. I thought to myself, who is she to be so presumptuous when she's not even my own family? Despite her haughty remarks, she has never once contributed financially to our lives. Today, other than cooking for her son, she hasn't done a single thing for our family. Why should I, tired from work, have to be told by such a person that I'm to go without dinner? Enough is enough. What are you doing here? Going through someone else's fridge and using up their food without permission. I was in charge of cooking in our household. I had planned out the meals for the entire week in advance, making them cost-effective. Yet, most of the week's ingredients that were in the fridge have already been used up, even though we're just halfway through the week. The mother-in-law probably has no idea how hard I've been trying to save money. All the ingredients for the week were there, and now they're all used up. And you've even thrown away parts that could have been used. What were you thinking? Despite her saying I should skip dinner, the dinner table was filled with more food than her son could probably eat. Yet, without showing any remorse, she laughed and said, "Oh, you mean I threw away the usable parts, like the leafy parts? You were going to make my son eat that? Those parts are also valuable ingredients." As I confronted the mother-in-law, her son, who had been eating her food, said in a carefree manner, "Come on, she didn't mean any harm. Just let it go. Who does he think is the reason I've been trying so hard to save?" I was dumbfounded. Unintentionally, I blurted out, "What?" Perhaps realizing his words were thoughtless, he shrank back a bit. Seeing this, the mother-in-law said, "Excuse me, Emma. What's with that attitude towards your husband? I can't stand it anymore. You're not fit to be his wife. You probably waste all of his earnings by going out and having fun every day, don't you?" She said this based on her own assumptions. I go to work, not out to play. However, before I could retort, my mother-in-law spoke up. "You freeloading NEET, get out. Divorce, divorce." Mother-in-law's outburst made me frown, but as I glanced back and forth between her and my husband, realizing the extent of his apathy towards our relationship, I felt all my love for him evaporate. Whether he was afraid of being abandoned by mother-in-law or for some other reason, he would always ignore me whenever mother-in-law blamed me for everything. I had done so much for our life together, yet he would never defend me from her, let alone admit his own faults. The reason our life is so financially challenging is not just due to his meager earnings, but also because I've been paying off his debts to the tune of $1,300 every month. After allocating that $1,300 for his debt, the remaining money is barely enough for rent and living expenses, making it hard to save. That's why I had been trying so hard to save up. Although he earns a bit, he considers the $1,300 as borrowed from me and plans to pay me back gradually. But at this rate, he'll never be able to pay me back. I doubt he'll ever finish paying me back even when we're old. I wondered if there was any point in continuing this marriage, having to save and pay off his debts, especially when constantly berated by mother-in-law. Then it struck me. Maybe I should just leave him to his mother. Having made up my mind, I nodded. "All right." "Oh, how wonderful, John. Now you won't have to deal with that troublesome wife anymore." Mother-in-law joyfully clasped her hands together, while John looked bewildered. And for good reason. All this time, I had been the one paying off the debts he incurred. If I were to accept the divorce, he would lose the person paying for him. However, ignoring John's gaze, I began to pack my things. I figured Linda would make John fill out the divorce papers. I stuffed my valuables into my bag. I'll come to pick up the rest of my stuff later. If anything's missing, I'll sue. With that, I left the house. Immediately after, I received a message from John online saying, "What should I do about repaying the debt?" I couldn't help but laugh. Rather than worrying about his wife who was kicked out after being told to get a divorce, he seemed more concerned about his debt. He really was a hopeless man. I might need to be grateful to my mother-in-law for pushing me to get divorced before he drained all my money. But I worried that if things stayed this way, John might not want to let go of me, who was repaying his debt. So, I replied, "You know, if your mother was so insistent on us getting a divorce, she must believe she can support you even if I'm gone." "Wait, by support, you mean she's going to repay my debt?" "Maybe. I don't know much about your mother, But if she's calling me a freeloader, she must have money, right? Then I'll ask her to pay you back for me too. I was relieved that he didn't forget about repaying me. If he had, I would have had to involve a lawyer and negotiate. In reality, with so much debt to pay, the savings we accumulated during our marriage wasn't much. I really needed him to pay me back as soon as possible. The longer he waited, the less likely he would want to pay. If that's the case, how about she pays me in one lump sum? If your mother finds out you're still connected to your ex-wife, it might become problematic, right? You're right. I'll talk to her. John readily agreed to my proposal. Thanks to that, he didn't cling to me and handed over the already filled-out divorce papers when I came to collect my things from the house. My mother-in-law watched me gather my belongings with a smug look on her face. When I finally said to my mother-in-law, "From now on, everything's on you." "Good luck," she laughed and replied, "From now on, John will be supporting me. What is there for me to worry about? She probably hasn't discussed money yet." I quickly left the apartment before my mother-in-law found out the truth. After staying at my parents' house for a while and finding a new place, I moved in. Just as I was enjoying my new life living alone, I got a call from my mother-in-law. I was so busy that I forgot to block her number. When I answered the phone, my mother-in-law sounded panicked. "I never heard of this." "What?" "A monthly repayment of $1,300. "Oh, didn't John inform you?" "John had debts, and until now I've been repaying $1,300 every month. But since we're divorced, it's now your responsibility to pay that amount. I never agreed to pay anything. Since you pushed me out, both John and I assumed you'd be prepared to pay in my place. How much debt is there in total?" "Around $10,000 left." It was originally over $30,000. $30,000. I can't pay that back. Since she's a homemaker, she probably can't afford it. Perhaps she'll have to rely on her husband. I'm not sure who John will turn to for the money, but as long as I get repaid, I don't care whose money it is. By the way, I had made John promise before we got married that he'd repay any money I used for the debt. So, he owes me that amount too. What? So, you're saying he needs to come up with more than the original $30,000? That's impossible. I don't know about that. Please pay promptly. I can consult with a lawyer if necessary. When I took a firm stance, I could hear my mother-in-law crying on the other end of the line. I thought that with John earning well, and with you, Emma, the spender, gone, I'd be able to use a lot of John's money. This wasn't what I expected. It seems my mother-in-law planned to spend lavishly, thinking she'd benefit from her son's high income after getting rid of me. Looks like her plan backfired. Compared to John, I earn more, and John's salary is below average for his age, so his mother doesn't have the money to splurge. In fact, it might be more likely that she'll have to support John in the future. Since I've already divorced, please handle your family matters on your own. Goodbye. After saying that, I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. Since I wasn't sure if John and his mother would tell the truth, I took the initiative to inform his father about what had transpired. Apparently, he wasn't even aware that John and I had divorced. He did know about the debt John had racked up from gambling and was also aware that I had been repaying $1,300 monthly. He repeatedly apologized to me over the phone. His father immediately called in John and his mother and reprimanded them, saying, "What have you done?" Subsequently, he covered all the repayments to me. As for the remaining debt from gambling, he declared that under his supervision, John and his mother would work from morning till night, allocating their entire monthly salary for repayments. Consequently, John seems to have moved out of the apartment we shared and returned to his parents' home. In the neighborhood, he's now infamous as the foolish husband who, despite having me cover his debts, conspired with his mother to push me out. I heard he's been having a tough time. Recently, I received a call from an unknown number. The voice pleaded, "It's me, Emma. Please get back together with me." To which I responded, "I'm not falling for a scam," and hung up. I promptly informed his father about this, and it seems John was no longer allowed to use his phone except for work-related calls. As for me, now free from the stifling life with John, I'm diligently working at my company. For the time being, I've decided to say that my job is my only love, refraining from romantic pursuits.
Well, considering your father-in-law was a director at a major company, I'm just curious about how much inheritance he might have left behind.
John tried to cover up his curiosity. I sighed internally, but kept a cheerful smile on my face. I heard it's $54,000. John looked shocked. My name is Catherine. John and I have been married for 20 years, and our son left for college this year. Life with just the two of us is quiet, but we get by. On weekends, John joins his colleagues for futsal and is out practicing all day. I work part-time, and on my days off I indulge in gardening or attend yoga with my friends. Even though we do different things, I think we're a typical couple for our age. However, something terrible happened in our peaceful life as a couple. It started with a message I received from a friend who attends yoga with me. And in the message, a photo was attached. "I'm at the station now, but isn't this your husband, Catherine?" I hesitated, but when I opened the photo, even from a distance, I could clearly tell it was John. He was walking hand in hand with another woman. My heart was beating loudly. Could John be cheating? He said he was going for futsal practice in preparation for tomorrow's match, but was that a lie? "I think it's my husband." My friend responded immediately. "What will you do? Do you want to come over?" After hesitating for a moment, I began using my cell phone. "No, I'm good. I'll talk to my husband." I closed the phone and sat down on the sofa. I had no motivation to do anything, and the only thought in my head was, what should I do? I could ask John, but I was afraid to. What if he really was cheating? At this age, thinking of divorce, especially when I only have a part-time job to support myself, made me think that I couldn't possibly go through all that. If I pretend not to know, I can continue living a peaceful life like before. But the idea of pretending and the ambiguity bothered me deeply. I don't know how long I sat like that, but I was jolted back to reality by the sound of the front door. It was already 7 in the evening.
What's wrong? Why haven't you turned on the lights?
John turned on the lights in the living room with a surprised voice. "Oh, sorry. I fell asleep." John laughed in disbelief and began washing his uniform in the washing machine. Seeing that, I realized he must have been exercising and wondered if the earlier photo might have been a mistake.
"If you're tired, do you want to eat out tonight?"
I nodded eagerly, hoping that spending time together would help ease my uneasy feelings. "Did you stop by anywhere else today besides futsal?"
"Not really. Why?"
"Just wondering. You mentioned wanting new shoes recently, so I thought you might have gone shopping for them."
"Oh, I haven't bought them yet."
With that, our conversation ended. But the John in front of me seemed just like how he has been as usual. They say everyone has at least 3 doppelgangers in the world. Perhaps the man in the photo was
one of them. However, once I began to suspect him, it was difficult for me to not suspect him. I often found myself doubting him during his late-night overtimes or during his sudden overnight business trips. Bad things do happen, and one day, on my way home from my part-time job, I stopped by the supermarket to buy ingredients for dinner. I realized my phone was ringing, so I took it out of my bag and stepped into a less crowded aisle. The name displayed on the screen made me frown. It was my brother's name. Though I occasionally communicated with my sister-in-law during events like our children's enrollment to their school or their graduation, I hadn't spoken to my brother in years. These sudden phone calls from your own relatives are often not good news. Hello? Hesitantly, I answered the call. What I heard from my brother was that our father's health was getting worse. He suddenly collapsed at work and was taken to the hospital. After some detailed exams, they were told he didn't have much time left. My mother had passed away from an illness a few years ago, and although my brother and his wife had offered to live with our father after that, he refused and lived alone, seemingly in good health. The last time I spoke to him, he sounded fine, so this news was really surprising. After telling my brother I'd visit soon and hung up the phone, I took a deep breath to calm my heart. When I told John, who came home from work that night, he looked really sad. I see. Your father. Don't worry about here. You should go see him.
Encouraged by his words, I went to see my father the next day. Dad, what happened? Are you okay?
Oh, Catherine. I suddenly felt dizzy and couldn't get up. Can't be old age, I guess. Sorry for making you worry.
His voice, usually loud and boisterous, sounded weak, causing pain in my heart. Though he looked pale, he didn't seem critically ill.
Catherine, did something happen? Did you and John have a fight?
I was taken aback by his sudden question. My father gave a wry smile.
You're just like your mother, holding things in. Live as your heart desires, not knowing what the future holds. For a parent, seeing their child's smiling face is the greatest happiness.
Realizing what he said, I was taken aback. Although I wanted to talk to my father a little longer, he told me he was tired, so I decided to leave for the day. Though my visit was only about 15 minutes, just thinking that he could be so exhausted from such a short time made tears roll down my cheeks. As I sat on the sofa near my father's room, waiting for my tears to stop, a man in a white coat sat next to me.
Are you here to visit your father? I'm the doctor in charge.
Oh, I'm so sorry. How embarrassing. I quickly took out a handkerchief to wipe away my tears. Taking a closer look at the doctor, he seemed to be around my age, with a kind face that made me feel at ease.
It's all right. It must have been a shock for you. Do you have any questions?
With his encouragement, I started to ask various questions about my father's condition and what to expect in the future. Despite repeating the same questions multiple times, he never looked annoyed and explained everything in detail until a nurse came saying, "Sir, we need you." Thanks to him, even though I still felt sad, my heart was somewhat at ease. After returning home, recalling my conversation with my father, I decided to call a friend who had sent me the photo. I wanted to discuss the suspicions I had about my husband's affair. I've been worried I might have done something unnecessary by telling you that. I'm sorry for causing you pain. No, I'm glad you told me. I've finally come to terms with John's suspected affair, but I have no idea what to do. I confessed, and my friend, chuckling, shared some advice. Actually, my husband is a lawyer. He said there are many clients consulting him about divorces due to affairs. I'll ask him for advice. Hearing this, I felt comforted knowing I wasn't the only one struggling. My friend immediately took action, telling me it's best to gather evidence of the affair
and that I could use a private detective agency to do so. She even recommended a few agencies and offered to go with me if I felt anxious, making me realize how invaluable true friends are. From then on, between visiting my father and working part-time, my days were quite busy. At the same time, my husband started saying he was getting busier with work. Overtime and business trips noticeably increased, and his suspicious behavior had me eagerly awaiting the investigation results. 2 weeks later, I finally received the awaited results. At the detective agency, I was told in a hesitant manner as they said,
"It's true that he's having an affair."
I was able to accept the reality without panicking or feeling upset about it. In fact, knowing the truth brought a sense of relief, dispelling the previous uneasiness. They showed me some of the numerous photos and explained his activities over the past 2 weeks. There were also some audio recordings, and it was worse than I had imagined. To begin with, his futsal games are only once a week, always in the morning for just 2 hours. The other employees always head home right away after the games, since they have families waiting at home. He spent all of his remaining time with his mistress. At times, she would even wait for him at a diner near the futsal court. He deliberately washed his jersey he falsely claimed he used at the game to ensure his lie wasn't caught. All his claims of overtime and business trips were lies, made up just to spend time with her. The most shocking audio recording revealed him discussing with his mistress about getting a divorce with me once he inherits his money, predicting his father-in-law passing away in a month or so. They also already discussed pre-booking an apartment near the train station. It seemed that his recent busyness was related to preparing for their new life together, making reservations for furniture and appliances. They even planned a premarital trip next month. All this left me feeling dizzy. The fact that my husband was eagerly waiting for my father to pass away destroyed any remaining love or affection I had for him. My only feeling was the increasing desire to divorce him. I paid a significant amount to the detective agency, took all the data, and decided to leave it to my friend to keep it safe. When I mentioned hiring a lawyer, they immediately agreed and offered to introduce me to someone they knew. But I had used all my money on the detective agency, and I was hesitant to touch our shared finances. After some contemplation, I decided to swallow my pride and consult my brother about it.
"Why didn't you come to me sooner?"
he exclaimed, annoyed. Thankfully, he generously offered to cover the expected legal fees. I had a meeting with a lawyer and discussed my desire to work full-time or as a regular employee at my part-time job. I was told that they could hire me as a contract employee, which gave me hope regarding my financial situation. With everything now in place, I started thinking about how to broach the subject of divorce. One midnight, I received a call from my brother. He was calling to tell me that our father had passed away. I woke up John and we rushed to the hospital. John briefly visited my father, greeted my brother and his wife, and said some comforting words to me. He then returned home by himself. Everything after that happened so quickly that I can hardly remember. There was the wake, the funeral, and meeting our relatives, and basically I had no time to grieve. Even after the funeral, there was the matter of sorting out the house, discussing inheritance, and handling the legal aspects of my father's estate. My brother, his wife, and I were all exhausted. John, however, kept saying he was busy with work and didn't help at all. Despite my father having just passed away, John went out to play futsal on the weekend. My brother and his wife were visibly frustrated, but they knew about my intention to divorce him and refrained from saying anything. With so much going on, I had to postpone the divorce. It wasn't until about 6 months later that things took a major turn. Finally, all procedures related to my father were completed, and the inheritance amount was confirmed.
"By the way, has your father's inheritance come through yet?"
It's scheduled to be transferred tomorrow. Why do you ask?
Well, your father was a director of a major company. I was just curious about how much inheritance he'd leave behind.
John tried to sound casual, but I sighed internally. However, I hid my true feelings and just smiled brightly. I heard it's about $54,000.
That much?
Yes, Dad must have worked hard to save that much. I just got a call today from the lawyer saying everything's ready. It'll be transferred tomorrow, so maybe we can go out and eat something delicious to celebrate. Emphasizing the fact that it would be transferred the next day, I smiled at him.
Oh, right.
John seemed lost in thought. The next day, after John had gone to work, before I headed to my own job, I conspicuously placed the bank book on the desk. When I returned from work, as expected, the bank book was gone, and instead a signed divorce paper was there. I hadn't anticipated things to go this smoothly, so while thinking, he took the bait, I headed to my lawyer handling my divorce and explained the current situation. I decided not to return home, instead heading straight to my family home where my father had passed away. Most of my belongings were already there. The things where I lived with John were shared, and how to handle them would be decided later on. Probably John and his mistress would end up living there. I've already submitted the divorce papers. There's no reason to contact my estranged husband. The only thing might be a claim for damages for his affair from my lawyer. However, since they couldn't contact him, nothing could be done at the moment. But 3 days after I returned to my family home, I received a call from John.
Catherine, what's going on? There's no money in the bank account. Where's the inheritance? And where are you?
Inheritance is mine? Why would you use it? I decided to play dumb for the time being. By asking my whereabouts, it seems John has returned to our home. I need to contact my lawyer immediately.
Anyway, why isn't the $54,000 in your bank account?
Did you take my bank account? I was planning to change the account for my salary deposit, but it disappeared. I've been looking for it.
Don't mess with me. We're married. It's a shared asset. You should share it with me.
I wish he wouldn't yell over the phone. It hurts my ears. The inheritance is an individual asset, not a shared asset. Plus, I've already filed for divorce. We're no longer a married couple. Please, stop contacting me. I won't return home. It's okay for you to live there with your mistress. Goodbye. I could hear John catching his breath, but I hung up on him and immediately relayed John's whereabouts to the law firm. That night, I received several calls from John, but I ignored them all and enjoyed a drink by myself. Having endured the suspicions of John's affair for almost a year, I deeply appreciated the peacefulness I was experiencing. After a good night's sleep and checking my phone, I was shocked at the sheer volume of missed calls. I assumed my lawyer must have contacted him, causing him to panic. Hesitantly checking the messages, some were aggressive like,
What do you mean by damages for the affair? If you knew, you should have said so.
Others were apologetic.
Catherine, I'm sorry. It was my fault. I want to talk things over.
Without replying, I left my phone behind and headed to work. In my bag was a new phone, a number John wouldn't know. This would be my main phone from now on. I had John's personality figured out, so I was well prepared. Later, my lawyer informed me that John insisted on discussing this face-to-face. So I decided it was time for a face-to-face confrontation. I expected this and felt it was better to settle matters swiftly. I chose a family restaurant with semi-private booths for our discussion to avoid any public attention. As expected, John and his mistress arrived on time. Seeing John after a month, he looked somewhat tired. Was it just my imagination? I had seen photos of his mistress, but it was my first time seeing her in person. She had her hair up in a bun and wore casual clothes. Her youthful face made me think she was a student, but I knew from my investigation that she was 25 and worked at a cake shop. I couldn't comprehend what such a cute girl saw in a 50-year-old man.
Catherine, what's going on? There's no inheritance and now a claim for damages? I'm completely lost.
Both my lawyer and I couldn't help but chuckle at John's words. The inheritance is what my father left for me. John, you have no right to it. As for the damages, it's because our divorce is due to your affair, and you two owe compensation for the pain you two caused me.
It's not about the affair. It's due to our incompatible personalities. Besides, it wasn't you who brought up the divorce. I did. So the affair doesn't matter.
Hearing such nonsense makes me want to pull my hair out. I knew he wasn't the brightest, but I didn't expect him to lack basic common sense to this extent. The one at fault can't initiate the divorce. It's not about who brings it up first. It's about you having an affair. If that's true, you understand that you're in the wrong, right? Also, I'll be demanding compensation from her too.
What? Why me?
Despite her cute appearance, she sounded very defiant and sharp.
Is that true?
John looked at the lawyer as if he was clinging on to hope.
Unfortunately, it is true.
You said I'd be getting money. I wasn't told I'd have to pay. I'm going home, and since I'm divorcing you, this has nothing to do with me.
As she raised her voice, she grabbed her bag and stormed out of the restaurant. It was embarrassing as other customers turned to look at our table.
We know where she works, so it'll be fine.
The lawyer said with a reassuring smile, causing John's face to go pale. Perhaps he realized he couldn't escape.
You know, that girl is quite headstrong. She used to be a good girl when we were having an affair. She was always smiling around me and would cry, saying she'd miss me when it was time for me to leave.
Even though he was talking about their affair, I didn't know how to react.
After we started living together, her cooking wasn't great. She constantly wanted new bags or clothes. It was cute at first, but being married to her was not what I expected.
Even though they'd only been remarried for about a month, complaints about her started pouring out of John's mouth.
I've realized something. I've always been comparing her to you, Catherine. You're skilled at housework, great at cooking, and you always waited for me to come home without a single complaint. So, would you consider giving us another chance?
I was left in disbelief, and I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I never anticipated this turn of events, and even the lawyer seemed too stunned to speak. There's no way.
Come on, I'll change, I promise. I'll never cheat again.
You cheated on me while using the excuse of being busy at work, didn't you? How can I believe anything you say? John lowered his head, repeating,
I want to start over.
You said you were busy with work when my father was dying. He was in a critical condition for about a month, but you never visited him, even once. Even though I was having a difficult time, you were cheating. After he passed away, were you just waiting for the inheritance? I noticed our drawer being opened several times where we'd put our bank book in. You probably planned to leave once the inheritance came in, right? With the divorce papers already filled out? As I listed each fact, John began to tremble. He probably never thought he'd get caught. You had a reservation to buy a nice apartment already, right? But unfortunately, since you didn't get the inheritance, you had to cancel. I assume the old house we lived in must have been unbearable for her.
How did you know?
I have plenty of evidence. Are you thinking that if we get remarried, you won't have to pay the compensation? With that, John got silent. I must have gotten him, huh? Realizing he was only after my money made me really sad and disappointed. If there's nothing more to discuss, I'm leaving.
Wait!
John grabbed my arm as I tried to leave.
Catherine, you're the most important thing to me. Please, I beg you, let's start over.
John's eyes were filled with tears.
I'll never betray you again. and I'll do all the chores. Please, come back to me."
Unable to contain his emotions, John began to sob uncontrollably. "Come on, don't make a scene. Aren't you and your mistress newlyweds? Why don't you two sort things out? Let's just move on with our separate lives."
"Turns out she's been cheating on me. She seems to have married me for my money. Without money, I'm just an old man."
Seeing my ex-husband crumbling to the floor, crying, was undeniably pathetic, but I felt no obligation to comfort him. People seemed to have heard our conversation, and it was painfully embarrassing to witness everyone whispering about John. Leaving my crying ex-husband behind, I picked up the bill, and my lawyer and I left. Later, as the two of them adamantly refused to pay compensation, I consulted with John's parents over the phone. Having little interaction with the rather shy in-laws who lived far away, this was my first call to them since thanking them for attending my father's funeral. To my surprise, I discovered John hadn't told his parents about our divorce or his remarriage to his mistress. This revelation left his parents in shock, with my ex-mother-in-law being bedridden from the strain.
"Give us some time. We're not sure what to do,"
was their unsure response, making it clear I couldn't rely on them. However, the next day, my father-in-law brought his brother to confront John. His brother, compared to John, was a lively, talkative, and cheerful man. John had often grumbled to me about how intimidating he was during family gatherings. Whatever transpired, his strong-willed brother made John agree to the compensation payment. Then his brother decided John would be taken back to the countryside. Tearfully, my father-in-law informed me of this decision. Since both in-laws were over 80 and had no income, they promised John would work at a factory owned by a relative nearby and pay me the compensation. As for John's mistress, her whereabouts were unknown, but since her workplace was known, they contacted her there. She shouted, "Don't contact my workplace!" However, I spoke with a woman claiming to be the manager and was informed of an astonishing fact. It seems that the person John was referring to when he said, "She's cheating on me," was the husband of the store manager, and she was apparently preparing to sue them. I was assured that John's mistress would never escape justice, and true to that word, a few months later I received the compensation payment. When I visited the cake shop to express my gratitude, as expected, the mistress was nowhere in sight. Naturally, she was fired from the cake shop. She had dreams of becoming a pastry chef, but that's now believed to be impossible. Currently, to repay the compensation, she's juggling multiple jobs, and according to the store manager, she can often be seen at a nearby construction site. Out of sheer curiosity, I took a glance and noticed her without makeup and being sweaty, and being yelled at by an older man while she worked. Having to pay compensation for the two affairs she had, she must be deeply in debt. I'm not sure how many years it'll take her to repay it, but she got karma for destroying someone's family. When I told my son about the divorce, he was genuinely surprised, but he said something along the lines of, "It's your life. You should live it as you see it," which was a relief. My biggest concern had always been how my son would react. And with me approaching 50, I thought there'd be no chance for love or even remarriage, but lately there's someone I've been interested in. He's the doctor who took care of my father in his final moments. Every time I visited the hospital, we'd end up chatting, and I found him to be very nice and wonderful. After the divorce, during one of my solo trips to the shopping mall, we bumped into each other, and in our conversation, I discovered that he was also divorced. We connected even more over our similar experiences. We've been out for meals a couple of times, and I always feel very comfortable around him. I don't know what the future holds, but I still hope and strive for happiness in my life.
Tom looked down at me with a smug grin on his face. "From today, this house is mine. You'd better think about your next move." As he said that, he spread his arms wide, looking around the spacious room with an elated expression as if he might spin around at any moment. The place we were in was my family home. My father was a wealthy man, and he was very particular about his house. The house that he had painstakingly built was worth $3 million. My father left this precious house to me and passed away just a few days ago. Yet, here was my husband, claiming the house I inherited as his own. Could it be that he thinks the inheritance I received also belongs to him? As I was about to explain that he had no such rights, my husband confidently showed me something. I'm not just making this up. This is the proof. What he held in his hand was, "My name is Emily, and I'm 38 years old. I work as a bank clerk at an online bank. I chose this profession because I believe my parents taught me the importance and the dangers of money. Both of my parents were serious investors. Growing up in a wealthy family, I was strictly educated about money from a young age. Money is precious. You must protect it yourself." That was one of my father's favorite sayings. Just because there was money in our house didn't mean that I could have anything I wanted. I felt I lived a life similar to that of a typical family. My allowance was slightly less than my friends, and we never dined in fancy restaurants. I attended a local public elementary school instead of a private one, given it was our local area. It didn't take long for word to spread about my family's wealth and our connections. "Emily's family is really rich, right? Must be nice. I bet you can buy anything you want. Do you always have the latest games? Let me come over and play sometime." In reality, I couldn't get everything I wanted, and I didn't have any expensive items, but that became the common narrative. Honestly, it didn't feel good. I believed I was living just like everyone else. In the higher grades of elementary school, my friend Catherine came to me with a problem. And I accidentally broke Karen's game, and now I have to pay for it? But I don't have the money. "Emily, can you lend me some?" Catherine had just become my classmate this year. "Haven't you talked to your parents about it?" "And I can't tell them. They would get mad. You're the only one I can confide in about this." I wondered if it would become awkward at school if I refused. But I was always told not to lend money. "Sorry, I don't have it to lend." She looked at me and left with tears in her eyes. The next day, I was called by Karen from the next class. "I heard you ignored Catherine when she asked to borrow money. Your family's rich, but you won't help a friend. Catherine said she can't compensate, so you should pay on her behalf." Why did it come to this when I had nothing to do with it? However, I persisted that I couldn't give what I didn't have. And there's no way you don't have money when you come from a rich family. Why are you lying about not having it? In the end, you care more about money than Catherine. You're abandoning her. So cruel. With that, she left. From that day, unpleasant rumors about me started to circulate. Karen and Catherine began to spread all sorts of nonsense, claiming I had swindled money from them and refused to compensate for a broken game console. The teachers quickly became aware of the situation and reprimanded them. But this only added fuel to the fire. Their slander became more and more extreme, spreading everywhere. Eventually, it reached my parents' ears, and my father had to come to the elementary school. Things escalated to a discussion between the parents pretty quickly. Since then, having received only superficial apologies from them, I haven't interacted with Karen and Catherine. They sometimes just look my way and whisper with sneering smiles. But they never spoke to me directly. During dinner, my father smiled in a troubled manner. Emily, next time someone asks you to lend them money, tell them your father forbids it. You don't have to say whether you have the money or not. If they still persist, tell them, even though it's forbidden. I'll consult and see if something can be worked out. I was fed up with money-related troubles. I nodded firmly to my father's words. I didn't discuss money afterward and was careful not to invite friends over after enrolling in a new school. I chose friends who understood me well. Even as an adult, I was careful to avoid financial troubles and immersed myself in work to avoid unnecessary inquiries. At 28, I was introduced to my now husband, Tom, by one of my few friends. From the first meeting, he looked at me squarely and was an open and honest person. He was a year younger than me, but he looked about 5 years younger. I was drawn to the straightforward and cheerful Tom. And we married 2 years later. We had a grand wedding ceremony. My parents, worried because I hadn't shown interest in men even after 25, were always anxious about whether I would ever marry. They were overjoyed when I did marry, and they insisted on a lavish ceremony. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Let's have a grand celebration. Your parents are also saying the same. About a month after the ceremony, my father suggested, "Isn't it about time you brought Tom to our house?" I trusted Tom, but I was cautious. His loose lips could reveal something about my family and cause troubles, reminiscent of my elementary school days. However, since we were already married, I decided to introduce him to my family. Seeing my family home, Tom was so astonished he couldn't move. "So Emily is this rich," he said with shining eyes as I showed him around. After leaving, Tom was inquiring all about my wealth on our way back. I brushed it off, saying I wasn't too aware of my family's financial details. But I had a bad premonition. "Actually, your father has been hospitalized." "What? Why? Is he okay?" I was so shocked I didn't know what to ask. "The doctors said they need to conduct more tests. Your father hasn't been feeling well lately. Remember, he hardly ate anything when you both visited." Indeed, my father didn't eat much that day and seemed to have lost weight. "We will get the test results this weekend. Can you come too, Emily?" "Of course, I'll make arrangements to be there." I was genuinely worried about my father. Over the weekend, my mother and I went to the hospital to visit my father. Although he seemed well, there was a hint of weakness about him. When I spoke to him, he responded with a smile, saying only, "Sorry for making you worry. One can't beat age." A few minutes later, the doctor informed us of my father's condition. Apparently, he has pancreatic cancer, and it's stage 4. It has spread everywhere, making surgery impossible. I was at a loss for words, and my mother broke down crying. Why? He always took care of his health. My father remained silent while listening. Pancreatic cancer is often diagnosed late as the pancreas is positioned in a way that it's hard to detect. By the time it's discovered, it's often too late. When we returned to his room, my father, looking resolute, spoke. "I'm sorry. I hope you to continue to live happily." Both my mother and I were overcome with tears. From that day, I visited my father at the hospital as often as time allowed. Due to a recent pandemic, visitations were limited to family members only. Father cherished his time with his friends, so he felt saddened by this restriction. Perhaps driven by this feeling, he seemed to wish for various people to visit our family home. Emily, after I'm gone, please take care of our house. Invite various people and give it meaning. That was his wish to me. How could I fulfill his wish? I thought hard and an idea came to me. I decided to look for a renovation contractor. Tom, concerned about me visiting my father every day on his days off, had been unsupportive ever since I mentioned the family house situation. How's your father's health? It doesn't seem very good. It must be tough on you alone. I'll help take care of your father too. His words were kind. Balancing work and hospital visits was not easy, so I appreciated Tom's support. But his next words changed my feelings towards him instantly. He's Emily's husband. I have to think about the future too. I'd like to know about your father's assets and all. It's not my money to talk about. My father manages the family finances. And if something were to happen to him, my mother would take over. I retorted, money is important. I recently met a judicial scrivener named John who might offer advice. You never know how long your mother will be around. Better to discuss early. I felt like sighing at his insensitivity. Is money all he cares about? Past grievances came flooding back. My father has a trusted lawyer he's known for a long time, so we don't need introductions. But we have to sort out the money. It's important. That's why we'll ask someone trustworthy we've known for a long time. Thanks for the concern, but we're fine. From that day, Tom kept bringing up my father's finances, assuming he was already gone, which distanced me from him. A few months later, after a hard-fought battle, my father passed away. Following discussions with the family, I inherited the $3 million mansion. In accordance with my father's will, Tom didn't even try to hide his keen interest in the inheritance. Was the inheritance from your father progressing? I've heard that there are a lot of taxes on inheritances. So I can introduce someone who can advise us on how to minimize the waste. Despite telling him it wasn't necessary, he kept persistently bringing it up. Emily, you've inherited that big house? That's great. When can we move in? How did you know? I ran into your cousin at the funeral the other day and we chatted a bit, and it came up. I wish she wouldn't discuss such important matters so lightly. I felt angry at my cousin. I may have inherited it, but it's too big for just the two of us. We're not planning on living there. What? Why would you inherit a house you're not going to live in? We should move into that mansion. A happy life awaits us. It's already been decided by everyone. We won't live in that house. How? Why do you decide everything without discussing it with me? I am your husband, right? I've explained to Tom numerous times that the inheritance won't become our shared property. But he doesn't seem to understand. But more importantly, I had a goal to fulfill my father's wish regarding that house. Perhaps feeling ignored, Tom started showing obvious hostility towards me after that. He attended my father's funeral, but he didn't help at all with the subsequent procedures. After the funeral, there was no time for the bereaved family to catch their breath. I was busy with inheritance procedures, memorial services, and visiting my father's friends. A month passed in the blink of an eye, then 2 months. Just when things seemed to have calmed down, I returned home to find Tom with a sinister smile on his face. Sit down. We need to talk. Wondering what was going on, I listened as he suddenly began to say this. I've changed the ownership of your family home to my name. Here's the proof. A document was placed on the table, labeled Ownership Change Report. I was stunned. Marrying you was a mistake. I didn't realize when we were dating how gloomy and lacking in communication skills you are. Even though your family is rich, your own income is low. You're truly useless. I thought having someone to do the housework would be good, but I can't continue with you. However, I'd hire you as a maid for that mansion. The pay is low, but you can live in the house your father left behind. What do you say? If you refuse, we'll divorce. I have no use for you anymore. Get out. And with that, he presented the divorce papers. What are you suddenly talking about? You changed the ownership. You can't just do that. I had it arranged by the judicial scrivener. What? Well, you'll regret it. I can't continue with you any longer. Let's divorce. Saying that, I signed the divorce papers, packed my things, and left the house. Money can change people so easily. I kept reminding myself of that as I headed towards my family home. The next day, I received a call from Tom. Give me the keys to your family home. It's mine now. Don't be ridiculous. It's not your house. It's the precious family home I inherited from my father. Saying that, I hung up the phone. He wasn't like this when we first met. Money can really change people's hearts. I was once again deeply feeling the terror of money. Now, what should I do next? As I took a moment to think, a loud alarm sounded, indicating that the home security system had been triggered. I heard a banging at the front door. Open the door, Emily. This is my house now. It seemed that the security system had activated because Tom was trying to forcefully enter the house. I don't know what you're talking about. This has always been our family's home. I shouted through the door. Stop joking. I've properly processed everything. Open it now. The sound of him trying to unlock the door and banging on it echoed loudly. I ignored him. Shortly after, a security guard arrived and restrained Tom. He's a stranger. Please take him away. What are you talking about? Didn't I show you the documents yesterday? With the help of a judicial scrivener, I've become the owner of this house. Without hesitating in front of the guard, Tom boasted. But I told him wait a moment and went inside to fetch some documents. Returning to the entrance, I showed Tom a copy of the official registry transcript. This house was definitely inherited by me, and I've properly completed the inheritance registration. This is the proof. Do you get it? Your so-called ownership change document is a fake. Tom was left dumbfounded. Just because someone is a judicial scrivener doesn't mean they can change the ownership without the owner's consent. The color drained from Tom's face. That can't be true, he told me. It'd cost money. But he said he'd process it for his friend me. That's a judicial scrivener's job. Hey, is this person really your friend? How did you meet him? I couldn't help but ask. When he found out that your father was rich and I'd eventually get some of that money. He approached me. He told me he could help with inheritance taxes and advised me on how to distribute the inheritance. He's a very trustworthy person. And when you said you wouldn't live in this house even though you inherited it, I consulted him about it. He told me it'd be troublesome, but for $20,000, he could change the ownership to me, the husband. So I had him do it. As he spoke, Tom's face looked like he was on the verge of tears. He took out his phone from his pocket and began to call. Common, please answer. He kept redialing over and over again. This can't be happening. Why isn't John answering? Didn't you think to research the inheritance registration process? or market prices before asking. You spent $20,000 on a worthless piece of paper. You're such a fool. That John person is just a scam artist. You openly talked about money and got completely conned by someone who came to you. Tom, I thought you weren't a bad person, but you were completely corrupted by money. Goodbye. As I tried to close the door, Tom desperately pleaded, "Wait, Emily, I was wrong. I want to start over with you. Please, take back the divorce. Isn't this a bit too convenient for you? Security, please take him away." Tom was escorted out by the security. Later, I strengthened the security at my family home and changed our contact details, including mine and my mother's. Tom visited a few times but stopped after being repeatedly turned away by security. 3 months later, amidst the chirping of cicadas, a memorial service for my father was held at the temple he had frequented, and there was a familiar face. It was Tom, who looked utterly emaciated. I wasn't surprised seeing him like this. I knew how he had been living these past months. I had heard about Tom's current situation from a mutual friend. Tom, wishing to reconcile with me, had lied to his boss about work appointments to search for me for hours on end. Eventually, his company caught on, and he faced warnings, demotions, pay cuts, and eventually termination. Furthermore, the all-too-trusting Tom had been scammed multiple times over these 3 months. He was lured with false promises of reconciliation with me, losing money each time. A genuine friend had warned him, but Tom had instead believed the sweet-talking scammers. As a result, he had amassed a huge debt and had been abandoned even by friends and family. The Tom standing before me now had lost everything. His income, his family, everything. His clothing was ragged, and he looked out of place at a memorial service. Before I could call security, Tom suddenly prostrated himself in front of me. "Emily, I'm truly sorry." Tom raised his voice, pressing his forehead to the ground as he apologized. Naturally, this drew attention, and the surrounding people looked at me. "Stop. This isn't good timing. Today is an important day for my father," I said in as quiet a voice as possible to Tom. I wanted to get through her father's memorial service without any incidents. I thought that was her way of showing respect to her father. I didn't want to disrupt such an important occasion. However, Tom didn't consider my feelings at all and kept going and apologizing. "I truly regret it. I only have you now." He started crying out loudly. His loud cries drew the attention of the relatives who were watching. "What's going on? Is everything okay? Did Emily do something? What is this man doing?" Various voices could be heard from around. I hated it. It seemed that today's focus would shift from my father to me. Enough is enough. It's my father's memorial service. When will you stop bothering me? Please, security, please help. He's stalking me. The security guards rushed over and grabbed Tom. "Emily, Emily." He kept shouting my name as he was taken away. I apologized to those around me. "I'm sorry for causing a disturbance during my father's memorial service." After that, the memorial service continued without any issues. I went to the police that day to discuss Tom's behavior. I was ready to file a complaint if anything happened. I also moved out of my family home to cut ties with Tom completely. Actually, I had been planning to move for a while. The move went smoothly since I had already chosen the new place. Later, a friend updated me about Tom's situation. Tom kept visiting my family home and was devastated when he saw the renovations. He was still clinging to the hope of our married life and becoming wealthy. However, he saw Quito on a news program. Quito, the judicial scrivener who had deceived him, was arrested for fraud. Realizing that those who do wrong get punished, Tom regained his composure. Now he has found a meaningful job. As for me, I had a plan to convert my family home into a vacation rental. The renovation went smoothly. Now, the former mansion is operated as a rental villa with my mother. The last time Tom saw the house, it was already a rental villa. The rental villa business is doing very well. I spend fulfilling days working with my mother. Dad, this is what you would have wanted, right? Every time we have guests, I talk to my Father in heaven. I'm glad I could fulfill my Father's wish.